Hi, Nick with Machine Gun Dad. Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got another episode in our field strip series. If you had watched the most recent one we did on the MG-34, you'll note that in that video I mentioned that we will not get into bolt disassembly because there will be another video coming on that. This is that video. We have a early pattern MG-34 bolt and a late pattern MG-34 bolt, and there are a couple key differences between them. Namely, the biggest one is this little retaining lug or retaining nut on the back end. You can see a very clear difference between the early pattern and the late pattern. This is squared off, while this has this spring-loaded detent on the back. They come apart in a bit of a different way, so let's get into the differences between assembly and disassembly of our MG-34 bolts. Alright, so first up on the docket is going to be the early pattern MG-34 bolt. You'll notice in disassembly they've got these two little serrated notches that you're supposed to grab onto, and if you got the finger strength for it, pull real hard and kind of just rotate the thing off. But I don't have that kind of finger strength, so I'm going to be using these vice grips. And another thing you'll notice is just the general, more, I guess, precision and relatively pointless, because they did end up making a updated, much more streamlined version of it, because, you know, they were having some fun in the war. It looks a lot cleaner. It's got sharper edges. Overall, it's a very fine piece, but a lot of it was pointless, so they moved on to simplifying it. So let's get into disassembly. Take your tool, or if you are ridiculously strong, just grab it and pull. Pull those two little tabs up and rotate counterclockwise. At least they got that right. Just kind of rotate it off, and once that comes out, you've got your little retaining nut here. The whole thing will rotate, pull right off. Just like that in two separate pieces. Now, this thing is really stiff, and we were trying to get the firing pin to come out, but it's very stiff, very difficult, and we're gonna have to clean it up, get it to unstick to get into that. So, from there, you've got your nut, your carrier, your firing pin, your rollers, the bolt face, everything here to go ahead and clean. Let's get into reassembly. Alright, now let's get back into reassembly. A couple things to note as we're putting it back together. Your top cover guides are going to be facing up just to make things easier, and on the bolt face itself you will have this large flat piece here, which is your extractor. You're going to have that facing down, and then this smaller flat piece right above the firing pin is your ejector, and since the MG-34 does eject through the bottom, you're going to want to have that facing up. So take your two pieces, run them together, rotate it over, take your retaining nut, and handy dandy, you don't need to use the vice grips to get this thing back in. All you need to do is line it up, run it down, and I don't know if you heard that, but that click right there means that it is now all in position. And to test that, you can grab the bolt and get it into the position you would be feeding it into the back end of the MG-34 in, get it nice and ready. Since I felt the spring tension, I felt nothing give way, I put it back together properly. So, there's your early pattern MG-34 bolt. Alright, now let's get into the late pattern MG-34 bolt. So, move that one off to the side. You're already noticing a couple things different. It's a bit more quick and dirty just to get the thing put together and out the door as quick as they can, because by this point they were in the Second World War and they needed as many of these things as they could possibly get. So, gonna make sure it is free floating, so you have no spring tension on it. And this thing, as you can very clearly see, this retaining nut is much different compared to the early pattern. This flat spring-loaded piece on the top, you are going to push in and rotate to the right. So that takes the firing pin and pushes it back into that notch there. From there, simple as, rotate it off. And then, just like the early pattern, straighten it up, pull it out. That's all there is to it. They're very similar. In fact, there's a little bit of parts interchangeability with it too. So, from here, clean this one however you wish. Get it nice and smoothed out, run some oil on it, make sure she's running good. Now, the reassembly of this late pattern bolt is very similar to the early pattern. You're going to take your bolt and carrier, and exactly the same way, you're going to have the guides facing up, and you're going to have your extractor facing up, or your extractor facing down, and your ejector facing up, just like the early pattern. Run it through, rotate it down so that you can put this retaining nut on. You can already tell it is a world easier. You don't have to fight with no springs or anything. You just put it back together, run it down, and then take this notch, rotate it up, back into position. You heard that snap. She's all good and all in position. Just like the last one, take your bolt, make sure you can rotate it over into the ready position. Spring tension is good, firing pin is back, everything is functioning correctly. That's your reassembly of a late pattern MG-34 bolt. Alrighty, that was our field strip of 2 separate MG-34 bolts. I'd like to thank you for coming to the channel. We had a lot of fun getting into it, learning about the different parts, and as I mentioned, there is some interchangeability between them. You can put the late pattern retaining nut on the early pattern bolts and vice versa to make it a bit easier for you to take them apart. However, another thing to mention is the early pattern bolt is, if it's complete, a whole lot more expensive than the late pattern bolt, so you might not want to split it up just in case as you're shooting it you break something, or God forbid you break something, or if you misplace it and don't know where either the nut, the carrier, or the bolt could be. These are worth a lot more than the late patterns. Just wanted to make you aware of that, but you can interchange a couple of the parts, or all of the parts. So, thank you for coming to the channel. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Rumble. Have a good one.